Hello and welcome to part 4 of our video series on maintaining the university websites using Cascade. This is the video everyone's been waiting for. We are going to finally get into the custom layout options that we have programmed into Cascade for our pages. So let's get straight into Cascade. You'll see here I've already logged in and I've navigated to a page. A couple real quick things that I haven't mentioned previously about the interface here. You'll notice right here where it tells you where you are and what you're looking at. It gives you the icon and the type of asset you're looking at, and it gives you the title of the page. Just below that, you see something that's a lot more like the path, similar to the URL of the page. The Detroit Mercy main site, this will convert to whatever URL is on the website, in this case www.udmercy.edu, and then /_training/C8 train finished. That would be very close to the URL of the page once it's published on the website. Now as we go into editing this, another tip I forgot to mention was you can hide this sitemap to give yourself some more room. This little icon here with the caret pointing left will hide that sitemap for you, and you've got the icon still there to bring it back at any time, but that makes things a little more roomy for you to work in Cascade. Alright, so let me bring up my notes and we will go straight in. First I'll show you what this page looks like published. This is actually kind of that full screen preview that you can get from the More menu when you're in Cascade. And I've thrown in some images and some content and some different layout options here. We'll just scroll through them and look at them a little more as we go. Accordion sections, a column section, a big call to action button. Again, the footer here is something that will automatically be inserted, as well as the page header. Those things won't be part of what you edit, but everything in between is what we'll play with today. Okay, going back to Cascade, and I'll bring out the sitemap. Nah, actually, I'll leave it hidden. Okay, here we will click the edit button. Once again, as I mentioned before, you're going to get a form that shows you the content in your page. As I briefly touched on previously, you first will see some metadata here for the page. The display name is primarily the phrase for the page that will appear in the navigation menus, so you want to keep that nice and short. You still want to make it clear, but the shorter the better for display name. The title again is the actual displayed title at the top of the page, just under the header. You'll see it says explore all your page layout options, and again, if we look at the rendered version, there it is here. That's the title. The next few pieces of metadata we've inserted inline here in the content editing view. Display and navigation is typically going to be set to yes. Display share buttons will insert a little bit of code at the top and bottom of each page that allows people to share that page on various social media, as well as via email, even to a printer. So, but we've done some research on this. The only things that ever really get shared this way are news stories. That's about the only thing that we've seen any use of those share buttons. So that's set to off by default, except for news stories. And then display and sitemap. We actually haven't implemented a sitemap as I record this. You can leave it to yes. Overall, besides the display name and the title, you can just scroll down and start looking at the page content. Oh, by the way, before I get off the metadata, you'll notice there's a metadata option at the top of the edit view. And if you click that, you'll see some more metadata that's available to you. Most interesting is the description field. The description metadata is still pulled in by search engines such as Google, Bing, what have you. And so when you see a little, 3 or 4 lines of text under a search result that very often will pull from this description here. So it might be very well worth your while to fill that in with some a good concise description of what this page is about. Keywords is an older metadata for web pages that current research suggests is not as valuable in making you appear in search results or anything like that, but it still might be handy if you wanted to use that. We won't go over the other things right now, but we'll go back to the content editing instead. Okay, scrolling down past the metadata, now we get to the structure of the page. It's noticed this is the page template being used here, or the content type is an ordinary page, and this is the most common kind of page that people will be working with. Real quick, you'll notice that these little hide and show icons here can be very handy. I just, right there, it jumped down because I hid all the page content by turning that, and by turning it again, clicking it again, it will show all the content sections. So a page is broken down into content sections, main content sections. You see the first one here. As I close these, in fact, it's not just the little circle here that will hide and show these, but the whole colored bar. So I'm just going to shrink these all down for a moment just to show you that there are on this page currently 1, 2, 3, 4 content sections. And then there's also an option for secondary content. We'll cover that later on. That's not used very frequently, but it might be a good option for you. But these main content sections is where we'll be operating most of the time. So let's look at the first one. I'll open it up. You might notice right away that these editing forms can get very long vertically. So sometimes collapsing these parts and the subparts can be very helpful. Now, let's go back and see what we're looking at. I told you here's the page title that we looked at. Now we've got another heading here. This, where it says Meet Cascade Folks, that is the title for this main content section. I guess I should back up a little bit. When you add or a content section, the first field under that content section is how you determine what kind of content section that is. So this is a drop-down menu, and these are the options for any given content section in an ordinary page. A full width content area, an accordion section, a call to action button, a columns area. Those are the main ones you're going to use the most. The last two, if you're getting into those, you're probably going to be working with us in marketing and communications directly. But these 4 here are the primary section types. So once you select one of those, this one is a full width content area, then the form expands to get the information needed to render that full width content area. Again, the title is Meet Cascade Folks. Going back to the rendered page, there it is right there. That's what it looks like. Anchor IDs we'll cover a little later. Those can be very handy. Essentially, there are ways that you can shortcut people to a certain part of a page, but we'll cover it more later on. Before we get to these things here, let's just go to the main part of the content section, which is labeled appropriately content. This, again, we covered earlier, is a rich text field or a WYSIWYG field. For what you see is what you get. And most of the content on any given page is going to be inside one of these elements. Again, look at the editing basics video for the kind of introduction to these. Right here, I'm just going to say that we've got, if I click in here, you'll see that down here at the bottom it says that text is contained in a P paragraph tag. That's typically what you want. Same with this. And then here is an unordered list, and we're in the first list item. If you know anything about HTML, this will look familiar for you. But if you're not, don't worry about it. The point is that you have some formatting options. Most of them we ask you not to play around with because they tend to get abused. Like bold and italics and underline rarely are very helpful. Sometimes we use bold, but bullet lists, also known as unordered lists or numbered lists, also known as ordered lists, can give you either bullet points or numbered listings, and that can be very helpful. It's a good way to present information that's more scannable and easier for users to look across. Also important is the insert and edit link function with its corresponding remove link. This is also an anchor option. We'll skip that. And also you have an insert edit image option, but you're going to see ways that are much preferred over sticking a picture into a rich text field. Again, before we covered this, this is the full screen version in case you really wanted to open up this field to work on it with more room. But I'll shrink it down for now. So again, here's the text, and we'll click over to the rendered page. Here's what it looks like on the rendered page. Very similar, which is why that field is called a what you see is what you get field. Now what's this box over here? The shaded box that hangs out to the right, kind of floats to the right there. We call that a highlight box. Highlight boxes are a sub option available within a full width content area. And here it's typically set to no to display one, but if you want one, you can click it to yes, and that opens up another rich text field that you can put in some text that again will appear like this. A note on headings, you'll see that this here, if I click on it, it says down at the bottom that that is an H2, a heading 2 line. And that is the highest level of heading you would want to use. Excuse me. The reason is because as we look at the page, and this has to do with kind of content usability. The title of the page is the only thing that we have that is a level 1 heading, an H1 or heading 1. Everything else would be either a heading 2 or a heading 3 or lower. So this is a heading 2. Again, you'll remember this was the title of the full width content area, and that is a heading 2. We also used heading 2 for the heading in this highlight box. You know, just like you were outlining a report, you would want the levels of your headings to make sense so that anything that's heading 2 would be under a heading 1 and anything that's heading 3 would be under a heading 2. That's just good practice for web content, always. So that is a full width content area. But what about this big honking picture we're looking at? Yes, you can insert pictures. I would say up front, if you want to add graphics and pictures to your web page, unless you are an expert, you probably want to talk to someone who is an expert. And so call marketing and communications anytime. If you don't know what optimizing an image for the web means, then you need to work with us. Some people will upload a picture from their camera. It's 8 megabytes and it takes 15 seconds for someone to download it on their phone and they think the page is broken, and we can help you avoid those kind of messes. Also, you notice this is a very wide and not very tall image, which works on desktop. If you get pictures that are too big, they'll fill up your whole browser screen or browser window, and people have to scroll and scroll until they actually see useful information. So just if you don't feel like you have an image you want to show, we are more than happy to help you put that on your page properly instead of having people kind of mess around and make common mistakes. So how do you do that anyways? Well, you'll notice that one of the options within the full width content area form is display full width image, yes or no. In this case, we clicked yes. It's usually set to no. And then you click here to specify which image you want to put on your page. And then very importantly, you need to put in some alternate text for the image. This is a requirement. It's just good practice. And don't blow it off. Put an actual meaningful description of that image into the alt text field, because some people have very poor vision. Some people are using screen readers because they can't see the picture. So the least we can do is put a little description of what the image is, and then they can get that information. It's actually federal law. All right, so just to show you how it works, let's change this picture out. Oh, by the way, this picture is from a Cascade user conference, and in the back row and kind of in the middle is a bunch of people from Hannon Hill, the developers of Cascade, and then in the front you'll see a bunch of users as well. But let's do something a little more down home, and we'll put in a picture of our own students. So if you're first specifying a picture or you're changing a picture, the process is the same. You'll click here. Oh, before I do that, notice that there's a little hint here that you need to pay attention to. It says that the required size for a full width image is 1,280 pixels. Again, if you don't know about sizing photos or images, work with us. There's technical reasons why you really want to make those images the proper size. The height can be variable, but as I said, when you've got these wide full width images, you don't want to fill your entire user's screen with a big honking picture. So this kind of like wide, not very tall banner shape works for full width. But anyhow, the hint is right there for you to remember the size of the picture you want to put in here. I'll click there and Cascade will show the choose a file dialog. Again, like in other places, it will default to recent. If you've been looking at a bunch of different images, it will show you the recent images you've looked at. You'll see several listed here. Here's the current one with the radio button selected, which you recognize, and then there's some other ones that I've looked at recently on this account. Note this little icon here. If I click that, you can see a nice little preview of each image available. If I click this, if I click it again, then I'll get a little more information, at least the path of the images I'm looking at. So I'm going to try this student's silly JPEG. When I click it, it shows me some information about it. Unfortunately, it doesn't show me the dimensions of the image, but I just happen to know because I uploaded this image that it's the proper width, 1280 pixels. Okay, so it's selected. I click choose. You see a change here. And so let's preview draft. And once again, Cascade will take several seconds to render the page. And we should see the new version of the page with the replaced image coming up momentarily. Okay, so the page is the same except the image has been swapped out. Here's an example of an image. It's full width and it is taller, and it will fill the entire user's, it's on the barrier of filling in the whole screen. which is why we advise against these big giant photos in most places. Again, as mentioned before in the editing basics, we are now looking at a draft of this page. We have not yet submitted it. Going back to the current version, it still has the old image. And while we're looking at this, remember again to always check what your page is going to look like on a phone. Watch what happens when I squeeze this browser window down to a phone shape. One thing you'll notice is, because of our wonderful responsive code, that image, since it's the right size, is shrinking down to still be full width, even though the width is quite a bit different than it was at first. You may have also noticed that this highlight box, which floats to the right and which the text can start to wrap around, will stay there. Say this is a tablet size. As we go thinner horizontally, it will finally disappear. And if you scroll down, you will see that instead of trying to float on a thin display, it pops down to the bottom of that content section. Okay, so that's how highlight boxes work. So we'll stretch this out and go back to Cascade, which has the new image. And let's see here. I'll check my notes, make sure we're not forgetting anything there. Oh, I forgot something kind of cool. Let's go back to editing this. You'll notice over here, we are still looking at the draft, so when I click edit, it goes straight into editing the draft. If for some reason we happen to be viewing the current version when a draft existed, but we were looking at the current version, if we clicked edit at that time, that's when you get that message up at the top that says, hey, you have a draft, did you want to resume editing it or discard it or whatever. But what I wanted to show you is another option in the full width content area. You may have noticed it as I scrolled back and forth. Is you have the option to display a video. So let's say we want to take out this image, the full width image, and have a video there instead. Again, a full width video is going to take up a large portion of your person's screen, particularly on the desktop displays. But anyhow, you can do it. And all you need to do is click yes on display video, and you've got to fill in some information. Now, some of this has been pre-filled because I was playing with this earlier. In fact, for your information, even though I turned off the full width image, if I turn that back to yes, the information is still there. It's just that it's hidden when I click no, and when the page renders, it will be not included. But the display video, you have two options. You can put in a YouTube video or a Vimeo video. We'll skip down to how you specify what video to show here. And it's this field that says YouTube video ID, 11 characters. So I'll cover this real quick. You say you're on YouTube and here's the video you want to show. This is a video of them installing the athletic field lights last fall. And the 11 characters that you need, we'll just watch this for a second, it's kind of cool. But the 11 characters you need is the video's ID. There's a few different ways to grab that, but here's one. It's by going up into the URL, and in the YouTube URL, somewhere in this mess of parameters, you'll see V equals. It's always going to be after the question mark. Somewhere it'll say V equals. And if I put my cursor right there, hold down my shift key, and hit the right arrow 11 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, that is your 11 character YouTube ID. you'll notice it stops just before this ampersand. That's another parameter that will not be part of the YouTube ID, but there it is. That's the ID for your video. So you bring that into Cascade, you paste it in there, it'll say the maximum allowance of 11 characters is reached, and that's fine. And your videos will have, kind of a preview image automatically. If very often the automatic preview image is not great, so you can upload your own. There's an option here. I won't cover it right now in the interest of time, but you can upload your own video kind of thumbnail or preview image, or it's also called a poster image. So you can make, when someone's not playing that video, it shows exactly the most attractive video, the most attractive image that you can grab from it. That's a whole other thing. But in any event, you should also put some alt text there for the video, just as you would do for an image. So I'm going to click Preview Draft again. And Cascade is not working super fast today, so we'll wait the, say, 15 seconds for it to render the page. You'll notice in the upper right corner that you've got the spinning circle there. That's where you can look to see if Cascade is working or not. There we go. Now we have, instead of a full width image, we have an embedded video on this page. Again, very wide. I'm going to go to the More menu and click Full Screen Preview. That's what I did before to get this older version of the page looking the way it does, without all the menus and stuff from Cascade. We'll give that a minute to load up. One other thing I'll point out while we're waiting is these very handy menus or links up at the top, the My Content link and the search link. Just in case you happen to see those disappear, it does happen when your browser window is just not quite wide enough. So maybe if you widen that out, there they come back. You notice also the site content link over here disappears. But let's look at the rendered page here. Again, on desktop, the video is huge, but it's got a nice little, play button embedded on top of it. I'll shrink this down to, say, a tablet width. Still looks great. And a phone width looks great. And dare I click this, it will do a nice full overlay for the video from YouTube. So there it goes. So that's how you embed a video. All right, that pretty much covers the full width content area. The rest of them will go more quickly because they all have components of the rich text fields that we've already covered with the full width content section. So let's continue to edit this draft. And again, here's the page content. The first main content section is the one we were working in. Let's just shrink that one down so we can get to, and you'll see here, this main content section is one of 4 on this page. Let's just click this bar and shrink it all down to get to the next one. Okay, the next main content section, again, from our set of options here, is the accordion content section type. Now the accordion, let's go take a look at what that looks like. We'll scroll down. Sorry, my phone just went off. Okay, so here's the accordion section by default. You'll notice it has a title, and then it has this thing, which is something that shows and hides some content. So the classic reason to use this is if you had a frequently asked questions page And you could have each one of these shaded areas, these accordion item headings, would be the questions, such as how much wood would a woodchuck chuck? And those could all be stacked in a small amount of space, and people could scroll through them, find the question they want, and click it and get the answer. So how do those work? Well, again, you go in and you can add a content section, you use the plus sign. If you wanted to remove this content section, you would hit the red X. If you wanted to reorder these content sections, you have these black arrows up or down, or just down when it's the top one, and just up if it's the bottom one. And that can help you reorder stuff. So again, for this main content section, we made it an accordion type by selecting here, and that gives you the accordion form. Again, like with the full width content section, I'll open that up again real quick. The section itself has its own title. So that gives that heading for the section. I'll shrink that down. So does an accordion section have a title? Again, let's look at it. That looks like this, accordion section title. So you kind of see the section has a title here, video, some content, a highlight box. Then the next section has a similar looking title. And then the first under the title, we then have one or more accordion items. The item is kind of like the question answer pair or the heading content pair. So the heading for the item is where I put how much wood would a woodchuck chuck. You see here. And then the content is very minimal here. Let's add some out. This is a question we need to have answered. So let's go get the answer, and of course that's what the internet is for. So off screen, I'm going to go find the answer to how much wood would a woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck would chuck wood. And of course, because the internet, I found that information. So I copied some information from a web page, and as I mentioned in the previous videos on editing basics, you want to be real careful when you paste in to one of these rich text fields, because very often lots of unwanted code gets pasted in with it. So I'm going to do what I usually do and edit, hit the edit menu and select paste as text, and it will tell me that now I'm in plain text mode for pasting. I'll dismiss that and highlight in there, and I'm going to hit the paste function on my keyboard. Okay, I'll let you pause the video and read this for yourself, but apparently woodchucks would chuck about 700 pounds of wood. I'm not sure if that's per day or what. Oh yeah, 700 pounds of wood per day. That's pretty impressive. Anyhow, so that's how you remember paste as text is your friend. I want to point out something. If I click in this block of text, there is no element indicated in the little status bar of the rich text field showing what kind of HTML, web code element it's being contained in. When that happens, you do want to add blocks of text into like a paragraph tag, usually. The way you can do that is by using the Formats menu. Here, by the way, is where you can choose headings. If you wanted, most typically you'll use headings 2 and 3. As I mentioned, heading 1 is reserved for the page title. But also, for blocks of text, that gives you the option of paragraph, which is the most common content element. So when I click that, so when my cursor's in this block of text and I go to the Formats menu and select blocks, paragraph, it wraps this block of text in a P tag, an HTML P tag, which just makes it more consistent the way it lays out with the spacing and stuff like that on a page. So you might run into that sometimes. All right, so let's preview this draft. All I've done is added more content to that accordion item. We'll give Cascade a minute to render the page. I can close this video. And then we'll scroll down to that accordion section. How much wood would a woodchuck chuck? Click it, and there it is. And you'll know that because it is a rich text field here, you can add bullet lists, you can add links. In fact, let's do that right now. Add something with a link. I'm going to go back to edit. You might notice I've been using only drafts right now. Unlike older versions of Cascade where you did a lot of submissions and committing a lot of versions while you're doing minor changes to a page. Here you're working primarily in drafts and previewing drafts. And that saves on, well, I won't get into the technical benefits of that, but it's a difference from the old way of doing things. So again, to make a link, to link to another page, and this is the whole point of the web, is you first highlight the text you want to be a link. So we'll highlight a woodchuck can chuck 700 pounds of dirt a day. And then we click the insert edit link icon. Here we have an important distinction here between internal and external links. If I am linking to another page in Cascade, meaning on one of our other university websites that's maintained in Cascade, you're going to want to choose an internal link. So if I choose an internal link and then click the link source, you're going to get, similar to the image chooser here, a way to find the page you want to link to. It doesn't have to be on the same site. It just has to be on a site you have access to. Now this particular user only has access to the Detroit Mercy main site, so that's their only option. But many users will have the access. In fact, most users I think will have access to other websites so they can link to pages there. But in any event, say we're linking to a page on the same same site. It's kind of, the new Cascade does this a lot. It just brings you back to where you were and shows you the last things you were looking at. Let's say, so if I want to not choose something that's in this image directory, which is where we already are, I can back up using these links here. I can go to the Detroit Mercy main site root, which shows me everything in there. And then by clicking through the various folder options, I can see the pages within each. And so let's say I choose affordable, gives me a little bit of information about that page, and then click choose. Here it shows you not the, well, it shows you actually the page title, and then down below it shows you the path to that asset in Cascade. In this case though, so you'll do that a lot, and whenever you're linking to another Cascade page, please use internal links. There's important reasons for that, not the least being that when pages move, Cascade will update links automatically, which solved a major problem in older web development. But anyhow, always use internal links for Cascade pages. We're not going to link to a Cascade page at this time. I'm going to link to the actual page where I copied that woodchuck answer from. So off screen, I'm going to go to that page, highlight the address in the web URL address bar, and then I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to click external. Whenever you are linking to a website outside of Cascade, you use an external link. And you'll see the hint here that the link source starts with HTTPS. And I'm going to paste in the rest of the URL, which was on thoughtco.com. And my paste carried over a duplicate of HTTPS, so I'll remove one of them. Okay, so now I have an external link to this thoughtco.com website. The text to display is the text that I highlighted. In the title, if you want to use this and fill this in whenever your link display text doesn't make it totally obvious where you're about to link to, as in this case. So I'm just going to say something like Thought Co website tongue twister article. And our convention is whenever you are linking to a non-university website, or even a different website that is a university website but different from the one you're on, then let's set the target to a new window so that people don't get lost from the site they just left. Class we won't cover here. You're not usually going to use that. Okay, so now that's all set, I'm going to click OK, and now you see this is a link. If I want to remove a link, we'll do that later. It's pretty obvious, but that is just one part of the rich text field that I skipped earlier. Just to show you real quick, maybe it's obvious, but if I hit enter here and I click the bullet list icon, it's going to format this paragraph as a bullet list, and then I can hit enter again, and he concluded. You know, that's how you do a bullet list. Again, that's a good way to present information that's easier to read and scan over. So that's an anchor ID. You'll notice we just have one. I'm going to shrink this item, but I want one more item. This is where I hit the plus sign here. Mind you, don't get confused. If I hit the plus sign up here, I will be adding a new main content section. If I want a new accordion item, then I hit the plus on the item. The plus is going to give you another of whatever you're hitting the plus on. So let's click that. The page will kind of refresh, and there is my second item, and we'll just make this real simple. What is Bugs Bunny's greatest nemesis? And of course the answer would be Yosemite Sam. I will brook no arguments. So there's your second item, and we'll preview the draft just so you can see more than one accordion in a row. I won't try to fill in the rendering delay time with any clever talking. You can see here Cascade is working kind of slow. It works faster sometimes. Okay, so here's our accordion section. Now we have two sections. Click the first one. There's our link and our bullet list. And Bugs Bunny's greatest nemesis, Yosemite Sam. You'll find in our actual working version of Cascade that we've added a couple features to accordions so that you can open them all and close them all at once. All right, let's go on to columns. Here we have a columns section. It has two columns. I will show you, if it's not obvious, that we have column 1 and then column 2. In column 1, we have the title. Oh, excuse me, I should mention the column section has its own heading, H2, like before with the other section types. And then each column itself has a title. I believe they're optional, but titles help people scan pages quickly to find the information they want. So here's the column section. Here's the first column, its title, and then its content. And then this read more about columns in red with the little icon, this link, that is called a read more link. That is an option you can add to the bottom of a column. Column 2 is the same, except instead of a read more link, it has a call to action button associated with it. You'll notice the width just goes the width of the column. Let's go look at that in the edit view. So again, here's our first content section with the full width content area. Let's shrink that. Here's the accordion content section. Let's shrink that. And now we're at the columns content section. Again, the first field in this section is specifying that this is a column section. The section itself has its own heading. And then you get to the first column. And you see here, again, this is one of two columns in the column section. Here's the title. Again, anchor ID. We'll cover this here in a moment. And you can also put in an image or a video in a column, which is very handy. In fact, I like using images or videos in columns because they're smaller and don't take up, the whole screen like a full width image or video does. I've put in some content here from the Detroit Mercy Wikipedia page, and I just wanted to show you real quick right here. Let's say we don't want to link to this text. All you need to do is put your cursor in the text, or in the link somewhere, and then click the remove link button. Okay, so I built up a lot of suspense on that, and it was kind of anticlimactic, but there you go. Again, this is, I won't get too into it, but let's just see what happened in the source code, because I did copy this from Wikipedia. You'll notice it does not have a paragraph tag element wrapping it, and it does have this extraneous span, which really has no meaning. So even with Wikipedia, which tends to be better than most, you end up with extraneous code you don't want. And again, it's not wrapped, so again, I'll go formats, blocks, paragraph, and put that in a nice paragraph element like it should. Here's beneath each column, here are your options for a read more link or a call to action button. I don't think it looks very good if you put both. You could, but I wouldn't recommend it. And there's no need to have any if you don't want it. You could just clear this out. Let's again, read more link, call to action button. I'll just close this. Let's look again at what they look like. They're both just links, they just have different styles. Let's add one more column. Again, a lot of times getting through these long forms is easiest by closing down the sections you want to get past. Again, main content section is the column section. The column, here's the first one, I'll shrink that. Here's the second column, I'll shrink that. And now I'm going to hit plus on the second column, and when Cascade refreshes, here we have a third column, 3 of 3. Again, I'll put in a column, title, third column is the best. You can put in an image here too. Let's do that. Very similar to in the full width content section. When you specify that you want to insert an image, then you've got to pick the image. And again, it tells you the required size. It's important to note that the size for a column image, the optimum size is different from a full width image. Here it's 770 pixels wide. Again, the height is variable. Let's choose a file. I'm not sure if I uploaded this one yet. I could browse and go through the folders like we've done before, or I can upload an image. Again, unless you really know what you're doing with sizing and optimizing images, I'd prefer if you had us help you, so you get the right size and you don't have really large file sizes that take forever to download on a user's device. But in this case, I've done those things, and I'm going to choose an image from my computer to upload. And here it is. I've helpfully named it Charles Eating 770, the 770 being the width of the image that I sized it to. I'll click it. It will even let me know, it'll let me specify where I want to put this image, which is good because I don't want to put it where it's selected here. I want to go into the training folder. Oops. Excuse me, I need to click the actual, and within the training folder, and it's showing me only folders right now because I'm selecting a placement folder. There's an images folder. Typically, in most places, there is an images folder for images to keep them away from where all the pages are, just to keep things tidy. All right, so I'm uploading it. I've specified the image, I've specified the placement folder, and now I click choose. Okay, Charles Eating is specified, and again, this would be Charles Eating. And let's put in some content in addition to the image on this column that we've just added. Here is a picture of Charles Eating. All right, I'm not going to put any read more link. I'm not going to put any call to action button on here. I'm just going to preview the draft. And we can think of our favorite song for about the 10 or 15 seconds it takes for Cascade to render the page. As I mentioned in previous videos, we plan to speed this up by re-engineering some parts of the website, but that's going to be a significant project. All right, again, scrolling down past the sections we've done previously, here's our column section, and ta-da, there is Charles Eating. Again, you want to remember to check what your page is going to look like on a phone. So let's shrink this down. And right there is the breakpoint. To a certain width, the design code will maintain 3 inline columns. Once you go too thin, here it comes, it's coming, so about to do it, ding. Then the columns stack vertically. So here's the first column. Oops, excuse me. First column is where column 1 title down to the read more about columns. The second column is the one that starts column 2 title and ends with the button. And then column 3 is the third column with the image, which actually makes the picture look larger because it is now full width and not sharing the width with 2 other columns. We're almost done. Thank you for hanging in with me this long. Let me check my notes real quick to make sure I'm not missing anything. I'll let you look at Charles while I do that. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh, we did want to cover anchor IDs. The idea of an anchor ID is, you've probably seen it before. On a web page, these web pages can get pretty long. This one is actually not very long, but pages can get very long. And you might want to give someone a link to a web page that doesn't just start them at the top of the page where they have to scroll down, but you want to get them right to a particular fragment of that page. So HTML URLs have the option of a fragment identifier or an anchor URL. And you'll see these typically in a URL with, the URL and then the pound sign, kind of the hashtag sign, and then some little identifier that identifies a unique place in that page, and the browser will go straight to it for you. So let's look at that. We'll use this column section here as our example. So again, I'm going to shrink down the full width content area, the accordion section. Here we are at the columns. Let's say I want to get my people directly to this heading of the columns section heading. You put in an anchor ID, you just make one up, but you need to know that that anchor ID needs to be unique on this page. Other pages can have the same, but on this page, it needs to be the only ID with this particular string of characters. And so let's make it something like woodchuck info. Now, also, you don't want to have any spaces in your anchor ID, and I think dashes are allowed, but anyhow, I'm going to copy that because you're going to want it later. Okay, so woodchuck info is now the anchor ID on this page. So I'm going to preview the draft. And in fact, I'm just going to submit it before we even... And you'll see here's an example where Cascade has filled in a bunch of information automatically that may or may not be helpful. It does say that I added an anchor ID, I added an item, I added a column. It does give you some reasonably good information. But you could just remove all that and just say, you could leave that or remove it. You can make these comments as long as you want. But I'll just add added important woodchuck information. I'm going to check the content and submit. Now you'll notice here, the spell checking has 6 items it wants you to review. Each one of these is actually a legitimate word, although it's not a common word, so we can ignore them all. It also even checks the woodchuck info anchor ID, which again we can ignore. If you wanted to fix one of these, let's just say that's not the right word, you click fix, and Cascade will give you suggestions for what it might be that you mean. So that's a very handy feature, and I always recommend you take advantage of it. The broken links look good, the accessibility looks good. Those words we can all ignore, and so I'm going to click finish. The page changes have been saved. I'm going to click down here at the bottom. Do you see how much faster it worked that time? You never know with Cascade. Okay, now I'm going to publish this page. Give them a minute to happen. You have an option to view the published queue, but it just disappeared. I won't worry about that. Remember, on the More menu, if you want to see the live published version of a page, you can click on the More menu and then click Live. And it will load the page for you, which of course loads much faster because Cascade is not trying to render it. It's just already rendered and printed to the website. And scroll down, and there's all our new content that we added. Remember, we put an anchor ID, which is invisible, but it's in the code on this section here. So you'll notice, when you come to this page in the first case, it always starts at the top of the page. If I add now the pound sign and then woodchuck info, which I pasted as the anchor ID before. Let's see what happens. Hopefully it looks good. But the point is it will jump us down to the section I put that anchor ID on. So I'm going to hit enter now. There it is. You can get people directly to the section you want them to see. This is even more handy on a phone. You'll notice if I go back and don't have the fragment identifier as part of the URL, and we're on a phone, which makes the page much taller. Then when I guess I gotta stretch it out just to be able to see. I'm gonna add the # anchor and shrink it down. Let's see if it works, and then hit enter again. Go straight to that column section heading, which is what we wanted. All right, that's very handy. Gets people, it's all about getting your users to the information they want as fast as they can. Last thing to cover is the call to action button. This is the last major content type that we'll cover. Again, we covered a full width content area. You can have images, you can have videos, you have a rich text area, you can have a highlight box, you can have an accordion section, you can have as much rich text in the accordion bodies as you want, and you have the column section. You can have several columns. You have to have a minimum of 2, otherwise it's why I have columns. And then the call to action button at the very bottom is the simplest of them all. Again, we'll shrink down all these previous content sections. This main content section is of the type call to action button. Very simple. All you do is put the link text that you want to display on the button, and then you determine what you want to link to, a page, a file, or an external website. And then, like we did before with links, you select what you're going to link to. That's all there is to that. And again, this is the way it displays. When you do it as a main content section, it's a full width button. You probably are better off often putting the buttons in columns. And you could have columns that contain nothing except these buttons, so you could have 3 in a row, for instance. That's all that is. Last thing, I know I said that was the last thing, but I just wanted to mention another item. Secondary content is an option. This is not something that you can do on your own, because it's it's a way to bring in common chunks of code into many pages, and those chunks need to be created separately. But I just wanted to show you an example. Secondary content is on desktop. Excuse me, here's an example. On desktop, renders as a page high right side column. So here is one of the modules in the secondary content. The next one starts with available at Tommy's. This is the second one. It can contain images and it can contain videos. So you could have a stack of videos on the right side of your page when it's on desktop. The thing to remember is when it's on a phone, the secondary content kicks down to the bottom of a page. But if you have something that you want to appear on many pages and not have to update it on many pages, secondary content might be a way to go, and I invite you to talk to us in marketing and communications about how to do that. So that was a long one. That was the important one. Hopefully you have a good idea of what you can do with your pages. We've got lots of different options that you can play around with, and these are just the basics, but they should be able to help you do most of what you need to do when you're maintaining your web pages in Cascade for the university. Thanks so much for your attention.